Hello, my dear gardeners. Which roses need winter protection? This is the topic of our video. And of course, the simple answer would be if you live in zone 6 and under, so 6, 5, 4, 3, you would need to pay attention to protection. So some protection is needed for your roses. That's the simplest answer. But you know what? Garden is more complicated than that. We garden in different areas. So let's talk about those roses. Olga, Carmody with you, master gardener from Connecticut. Of course, we all know the first group, roses which are hardy in your area. You want to plant those roses only. And in my garden, not to worry through the winter, I usually buy roses which are hardier, at least zone 1 than my zone. I'm in Connecticut, in the United States. And it's a good area to grow roses. Majority of roses really do well in zone 7, and very often they don't need winter protection unless you're growing those southern beauties which are good only till zone 7. So the general rule of thumb, if you garden out in the pots and your rose wants to live outside in the pots, you want to go for roses at least 2 zones harder than your zone. So we know that. And some roses are not genetically equipped to face winters in your area. So if you buy a rose hardy only to your zone, you need to be conservative and do some sort of winter protection. If you have roses hardy in your zone, then they can be outside in the ground with minimum protection, but if you garden in pots, at least 2 zones. And still, you need to move your pots in somewhat sheltered locations. You don't want to leave your pots on very windy sides. So that's the first group of roses. The second group of roses would be newly planted rose. This is my rose, the unknown rose without a name. It's a good idea to know the name of your roses, where you can Google it and see what hardiness zone it is good to live at. My rose, I don't know what rose it is. It's freshly planted. I'm going to stay on the cautious side, and I'm going to move this rose into my unheated garage. So anything freshly planted, you need to step up your protection and go one step further. And if you, for example, if this rose, if you have a rose in your garden and it's hardy rose, but it's newly planted, and usually you wouldn't do any protection for it, but if it's a new rose, just make a hill around the root ball of the rose and cover it for winter. Third group would be diseased or defoliated roses. And you know, when a rose loses its leaves at the end of the season, it's not a big deal. But if a rose is genetically not a healthy rose, again, it was bred that way, and it loses its leaves 2 months before going into dormancy, that's kind of a long time for rose to get weakened, and rose gets into winter already weak. You need to step up winter protection if you want that rose to come out of the winter dormancy and start growing and blooming without severe winter damage. And generally among rosarians, the consensus is, if you're growing modern hybrid teas, floribundas and minis, and if you live in zone 6 and colder, you need to pay attention to the winter hardiness of those roses. Usually shrub roses and old garden roses are very well equipped to take care of themselves. But hybrid teas, floribundas and minis, you need to pay attention to them. And there is one more group of plants, roses, tree roses, standards. And I really am tempted to buy next spring standard here to put and grow it in my porch. Can be a beautiful sight. And since I haven't heated the garage, that rose will be going into the garage for the winter. Why is that rose so sensitive? In zone 6 and under, severe winter protection. Because the graft union is on the top of the rose, it's not buried in the ground. And that graft union is the most sensitive in the rose, and it's outside, exposed to all the elements. So from zone 6, severe protection for standard tree roses. And the last group would be the difference between grafted roses and own roses. The general thought is that own roses are better equipped to deal with colder conditions. So if you have grafted rose, also consider stepping up your winter protection. And of course, it's a trial and error. Don't feel bad if you lose the rose. I usually tell people, you know what, you lost the rose, yes, you spent money and you had high hopes for big beautiful blooms, but you know what, you learned from it. You learned that that rose didn't survive winter. You tried to figure out why it didn't survive winter, and maybe you need to increase your protection for next year. So that's the video for today. And there were several questions. The first question was about the greenhouse. Is that a good idea to move roses in? You know what, you have to really know your greenhouse. Usually it's a great idea because greenhouse protects plants from extreme winds, from ice, which is important for roses, right? But I have a feeling that some greenhouses do get extremely warm in the winters. You don't want anything over 45 for a long period of time, the temperature I mean, because roses can break up dormancy, and that's not a good thing. You want those roses to sleep through the winter and only wake up in spring. Another question was, do we need to acclimate our rose in case we kept it in the unheated space and then we want to bring it outside? Yes. Like any plant, it has to get used to the new environment. So it is better to do it gradually, put it in sheltered location first day and then move it slowly into the place where it's supposed to sit. It's just a good habit in the garden to slowly adjust plants to their new environment, right? So the same with roses coming out of hibernation. As for these long stems, which roses are happy to create now at the end of the season, we don't want to cut them now because new cuts create growth. We don't want to push roses into growth. We want to slowly bring roses into a semi-sleeping time, right? And the cutting of those long stems would be when rose goes into dormancy. And that happens after first good frost in your area, which is, let's say, overnight, mid-20s, and then roses for sure would not break dormancy. They're in, they're ready to sleep for the winter. And then we do the trimming of long stems for the wind not to rock the rose, and we are all done. Okay, my dear gardeners, I think our next video would be, or one of next videos would be, what to do on the day of moving your rose into the garage. I'm not ready to do it now. It will be all the way at the beginning of December. But so many people garden in colder zones. So many rosarians live in 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd zone. So they will need that information a little bit earlier. So we will film a video about that. Happy gardening, and we will see you. Enjoy your day.